Hey everyone, welcome to Bounding into Comics. My name is John Trent and I'll be your host. We're going to talk about Robert Pattinson, and he floated this idea of an R-rated Batman film recently. Before we get into it, I'd like to welcome you to Bounding into Comics if you are new. And I'd like to ask if you could please hit that subscribe button. Google is working double time to keep the little guy down, but you can counteract them by hitting subscribe and hitting like as well. We'd really appreciate that. So if you could do that, thank you very much. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. In a brief interview with Empire magazine, Pattinson was asked if he will be bringing his, quote, unconventional, intense psychological explorations to Gotham. The actor responded, "Yeah, I always want to." And that's when he floated this idea of an R-rated Batman film. He said, quote, "The only thing that's more complicated is the rating. As soon as you make something an R-rated movie, you're freed up to do so much stuff," end quote. No Batman film has ever been R-rated, at least live action. But that has not stopped filmmakers from making interesting movies that explore a number of adult themes. Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy definitely did that. That trilogy was very layered and explored multiple topics, especially in The Dark Knight, where Joker attempted to break the moral fiber of Gotham, pitting innocent citizens of Gotham against convicted criminals. His idea was that they would blow each other up and prove to Batman that everyone is just as batshit crazy as he is. They proved the opposite, that they are not just like the Joker, and they threw out their detonators and both survived, thanks to Batman stopping Joker from blowing them both up. The Dark Knight also explored how a man's choices can either lead him down a dark path, as seen in the case of Harvey Dent, or rise above it and shoulder a false burden, as Batman does at the end of the film, where he becomes the scapegoat. Batman Begins also explored corruption in society and whether society at large as well as individuals are worthy of redemption, and it looked at both Batman and Ra's al Ghul. The Dark Knight Rises also explored social upheaval and rebirth as Bane and his minions took control of Gotham and instituted their will on the people. They had their own courts, they instituted their own law enforcement. He basically kind of created his own version of what Gotham should look like. Those topics weren't really hindered by not having an R-rated. I think Nolan and company did an excellent job of exploring a lot of that and giving us really solid Batman stories. Not only were these issues not hindered, but the violence in the films was also didn't feel like it was toned down to me. The Dark Knight sees Joker blowing up a hospital, Harvey Dent murdering innocent people in public. The Joker goes on a killing spree where he murders a bunch of police officers as they attempt to stop him from capturing Harvey Dent. He throws Batman's love interest out the window. There's all kinds of violence in those Nolan films. Batman Begin also has a lot of horror aspects with Scarecrow's fear toxin. You see that where he's dealing with Carmine Falcone, and then also at the end where Batman is using it to keep people in their houses, and you kind of get that horrific vision of the bat flying over Gotham. And then The Dark Knight Rises is in your face with the violence on multiple levels. You have Bane, who's just brutally beats down Batman, breaks his back, physically just punishes him. And then you also have the threat of nuclear annihilation as well. So neither violence nor themes explored were really hindered by a PG-13 rating. What an R rating could bring is more explicit sexual themes and language. I don't know about you, but I got my fill of Batman's junk in Batman Damned, and I don't need to see him getting it on with Barbara Gordon like the animated Killing Joke film did. Once was enough, and I don't really need to see any more of that. On the language aspect, there are plenty of other ways for Batman to express himself other than constantly using the F word. In fact, if Batman were to constantly use it, I think it would kind of denigrate the character. It would take away the idea that this characterization of him being in control. He's always kind of in control of his emotions. He doesn't usually let his emotions get the better of him. Obviously, we saw that a little bit in Batman vs. Superman, and I would argue that might have been a little bit of an iffy characterization of Batman. where he kind of lets his emotions take control of him with his idea of Superman. But usually Batman is in control, and using the F-bomb constantly, that's a sign that you're narrowly not in control of yourself, and that's kind of the opposite of what Batman is. But we'll get into that a little bit later. As for Pattinson saying that having an R rating frees filmmakers and actors to quote do so much stuff, I don't buy that. I have to question, what does an R rating actually allow you to do that you don't really do in a PG-13 movie, especially by today's standards. PG-13 lets you get away with a lot. I mean, and those Nolan films are really good, and I think they did a pretty good job. Obviously, there's you can critique them, but I think overall those films did a really good job, and they weren't hindered by being PG-13. But I don't want to say the idea of an R-rated Batman flick wouldn't be successful. I think Joker proved all the doubters wrong when the Todd Phillips directed picture starring Joaquin Phoenix grossed over $1 billion on just a $50 million budget, production budget. So you could have an R-rating Batman film and it could be successful. Joker proves that. But Christopher Nolan's Batman films also prove you don't need an R-rating film to be successful. And I also think they prove that it doesn't really free directors and actors up to do a lot of stuff. It allows you, like I said, allows you to have the language and the sexual content. But what's really interesting is that this comment by Pattinson is kind of like the latest in a growing laundry list of odd and questionable comments he's made about the Batman film. In the same talk with Empire, he also said, in terms of the character itself, I want to push it as far as it possibly can go, and I think Matt Reeves does as well. You can do crazy stuff with that part. Well, on the surface, this doesn't sound all too terrible. I don't like the idea of incorporating crazy into Batman. Like I said, Batman is the opposite of crazy. He is controlled. He controls his emotions. That's why he is the world's greatest detective, because he makes sure that the crime scenes are controlled. He's systematically going through the evidence and looking at it and analyzing it and figuring out what's going on and who's doing what and kind of connecting patterns. And you have to be in control to do that. You can't be kind of out of control, crazy, doing that kind of stuff. I mean, maybe people like Pattinson could be saying maybe people on the outside might think that could be like connecting all of these dots and figuring out all these patterns could be crazy. Yes, I can see that, but I don't really think that's what he's talking about. Because if you look at his previous comments, he spoke to the New York Times in October, where he said he doesn't think that he doesn't believe Batman is a superhero. He says, Batman's not a hero, though. He's a complicated character. I don't think I could ever play a real hero. There's always got to be something a little bit wrong. I think it's because of my eyes is smaller than the other one. So he could be joking about that, making the comment about his eyes being smaller. Hard to tell with print. I don't think he is, because he also took issue with Batman's morality. He says, quote, his morality is a little bit off. He's not the golden boy. Unlike almost every other comic book character, there is a simplicity to his worldview, but where it sits is strange, which allows you to have more scope with the character. Now, that's a whole, we can really get into this. I completely disagree with him about Batman's morality being off. I think that is completely untrue. I think Batman is probably one of the more moral comic book characters we see. You could even compare him to Captain America. I think that's why a lot of people relate to Batman. I think that's why Batman has become one of the greatest superheroes there is. It's because of his moral code. It's because of how he reacts to certain things, how he views right and wrong, and he's also kind of not willing. He's willing to kind of cross the line and mete out his own type of justice outside of the law when it comes to a lot of these crazy criminals. And that's not to say he's like the Punisher and he's going to kill them. He doesn't do that. He's not afraid to like give them a right hook, beat them up a little bit, rough them up. But then he will also turn them over like Spider-Man would to the police and let the law handle it. That's kind of been built into Batman now. So saying that Batman's morality is a little bit off that's a red flag right there. And I think that's a misunderstanding of the character. And he would elaborate kind of a little bit more of this misunderstanding. He spoke with Felix Geist of Today, And he reiterated that Batman is not a superhero. He said Batman is not a superhero, and then he kind of qualified what he thinks superheroes are. They have to have magical powers. That's just also completely wrong. We have real life superheroes today that obviously don't have magical powers. They're people who choose to do the right thing in traumatic situations. Firefighters and police are some people that are definitely superheroes. So looking at all of this kind of like together, I'm kind of glad that Pattinson is being upfront about this from the get-go. It definitely kind of lets us into where he's seeing Batman and maybe where Matt Reeves is seeing Batman a little bit from Pattinson's view. So it makes me leery about this Batman film. Obviously, I said there's a couple red flags here. And I'm kind of glad that we're already seeing this, and he's kind of already preparing us for like what we might be expecting for this Batman film. But on the other hand, I'm kind of like baffled why he would describe Batman this way, which, like I said, I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the character. And if your actor is talking about the character and fundamentally is like not understanding who this character is, it could hurt the film. So I'm kind of baffled why Warner Brothers and maybe even Matt Reeves is letting him talk about it. And what's really interesting about that is that all the stuff that Pattinson is saying is just, what are you saying, dude? Like, this is wrong. This doesn't make sense. But everything I kind of read from Matt Reeves was like he's going to be bringing Batman back to detective roots. It's going to be very kind of looking at it from like the ground up. And that was really interesting to me. I really wanted to see Batman get back to those detective roots, see him solving mysteries. And that's something I feel like has kind of gone missing in recent iterations of Batman. So that's kind of like a two-face there. Pattinson saying one thing and then Reeves is saying another. But that's kind of my 2 cents on the matter. What do you think about Pattinson's comments? Do you think there should be an R-rated Batman movie? My name is John Trent, and you've been watching Bounding Into Comics. And if you enjoyed this video, I encourage you to please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.